Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. I need to find a new intro because saying that every time is really annoying. Today I have a really long case for you guys. This is probably the longest one that I've worked on so far, so I am going to put it in two different parts. This is part one of the Susan Powell case. I was requested to do this case like a few years ago. If you didn't know, I am from Utah, so this is like a local case to me, one that I've heard about for a really long time, and I actually have a somewhat personal connection to the case that I will talk about a little bit later. I figured it would be a good time to finally cover this case. I also wanted to let you guys know that I have officially created a submission form. If you have any true crime cases, conspiracies, creepy topics, creepy stories, I've considered doing like streaming of like spooky video games. I think I want to keep this channel more broad for right now, but I would like to keep the themes a little bit more spooky or within that realm, if that makes any sense. So if there's any topics or any cases that you guys would like me to look into, I will leave that below. Please don't resubmit multiple times for the same thing. My channel is really small right now, so there's no reason that I wouldn't see your submission. Anyways, I'll leave that down below, and I'll probably try and leave it in every video in my description, so it will always be there. But I am just gonna move on and start with the case, because this is gonna be a very long video. So this is Susan's story, but I do want to talk about her husband Josh's past a little bit because I do feel like it's kind of important to the story later. Josh's parents divorced when he was 16, and it was really messy. At the time, his family were very strict Mormons, mostly his dad Steve, who had become severely disillusioned by the church. One of his beliefs is that he had the right to marry another woman. At one point, he was interested in a married woman who had no interest in him, and he even wrote songs about her and stalked her. Terry, who's Josh's mom, wanted custody of the kids after the divorce, mostly because Steve had exposed his children to porn. Unfortunately, the custody ended up being split. Steve got the boys and Terry got the girls. This is so weird to me. I've never seen custody split like that. It doesn't make any sense why you would do that, why you would separate the children anyways, especially if one parent is clearly a better parent than the other one. I'm a child of 3 divorces, so this is just like super mind-blowing to me. I'm curious if you guys have ever seen this done before because I just can't process that. Anyways, Steve ended up accusing Terry of witchcraft, which seemed to be the only thing he really had against her. But she claims that she's more of just like an herbalist. She makes her own essential oils and teas, stuff like that. There were multiple accounts of Steve being violent with his children, but mostly with Josh. For some reason, he just singled him out. Josh ended up being very troubled. He had accounts of trying to kill family pets. He tried to hang himself at 13, and he threatened to kill his mom with a kitchen knife because she asked him to do the dishes. Moving forward, Josh and Susan met at a church event when they were teenagers. They ended up getting engaged when they were 19, which is very common for the LDS church. Here and for Mormons, it's very normal to get married between 19 and 21. I would also like to mention that Susan's family was not a big fan of him. The first few years of marriage seemed to go okay, but Josh had a really hard time holding a job, and they ended up not being able to afford their house and had to move in with his dad. Steve became obsessed with Susan. She mentioned to friends that he would do creepy shit like watch her while she showered or spy on her while she was changing. There were reports of him putting mirrors under the bathroom door so that he could watch her while she was in there, and he even groped her a few times.
That's Susan. Where's Josh? Really wanted her.
When she told Josh about it, he brushed it off and told her that she was trying to seduce his dad. Eventually, they relocated and ended up moving to West Valley City, Utah, which is actually where I grew up. Susan got a good job at Wells Fargo, and they ended up having 2 children named Charlie and Brayden. To all their friends, Josh became known as the very obnoxious, self-centered, and controlling partner. I am going to give you a list of the things that he controlled in her life. She wasn't allowed to use the car without permission. He made her keep a tight budget where after every grocery trip she was to log every item on a spreadsheet. She had to knit her own socks instead of buying them. When Susan was in labor with her first child, Josh told her to call her parents for a ride to the hospital because he was busy. He didn't show up until 2 hours after Charlie was born, and his excuse for not being there was he was backing up his computer. Josh even restricted what Susan and the boys were allowed to eat. He was once quoted as saying, "They already get one meal at daycare, why should I have to feed them? They're just going to poop it out later." Susan had to ask friends to borrow hot dogs because they didn't have any food in their house and the kids were so hungry that they started crying.
I didn't eat today.
You didn't eat? Huh? No? Are you hungry?
Yeah.
Yes. Did you eat some breakfast?
No.
No? Did you eat a cookie?
No.
No?
It seemed like the only thing that he didn't control in her life was her faith, her religion. For some reason, he still allowed her and the kids to go to church even though he had left the church years ago. But things just kept getting worse for Susan and Josh. She got him to agree to couples therapy at one point, but when he went, he wouldn't participate at all, and eventually he just stopped going. At one point, Susan recorded a very eerie home video that everyone debates about. Some people think she took the video for homeowners insurance, which I've heard is common, but I've never purchased my own home, so I don't really know much about that. But other people think that she might have been advised to take this video by a lawyer, so that way if she ever wanted to get a divorce, she would have it. She also specifies in the video which items belong to Josh. Throughout the video, you can see like some holes in the wall or damaged items in the background, and she just kind of points them out matter-of-factly, then just kind of moves on.
This is me. July 29th, 2008. It is 12:33 Mountain Time. Covering all my bases, making sure that if something happens to me or my family or all of us, that our assets are documented. Hope everything works out and we're all happy and live happily ever after as much as that's possible. Charlie, say hi. Bathroom. Josh felt the need to pull the mirror out and cut more holes in the wall. Said he was going to make shelves. That didn't happen. My toiletries, nail polish, makeup. I like to do Mary Kay, but it's expensive, so Josh always cuts me off after a while. I had necklaces too. I don't know where those are. I got in a rage, as you can see, and broke this. There's duds and pearls and opals in there. Broke this and threw all my DVDs and made a mess.
At some point, Susan did confront Josh about not being happy in their marriage anymore, and he stated, quote, "Over my dead body would I let you leave with my boys." So December 6th, 2009, Susan took the boys to church that morning and ended up walking back home with a friend because, as we know, she was not allowed to use the car. The friend came over and hung out with her a little while until Susan told her that she wasn't feeling well and she wanted to take a nap. I think it was around 5 p.m. and around that same time Josh said he was going to take the boys sledding. I saw something saying that Josh had made her pancakes or something that day. It would make more sense if he had made her something and then whatever was in that made her sick and that's why she wanted to go take a nap. But it could have happened after. I'm not entirely sure. I only saw this in one place, so don't quote me on that. This was the last time anybody claimed to see Susan. The morning of December 7th, one of the employees at the daycare the boys went to noticed that they were late. She actually said if it was Josh dropping off the boys, he was almost always late, but Susan was always on time, so she started to worry. It worried her so much that she ended up calling both Josh and Susan's work to see if they'd shown up, which of course we find out neither of them had, but neither of them had called in either. After this, she ended up calling their emergency contact, which was Josh's sister, and she also said that she hadn't heard from them. The family ended up calling the police and asking them to go over to the Powell house, and they gave them permission to break in because they started to worry that the whole family might have died of carbon monoxide poisoning, which I guess was frequently happening in this area at the time. When they got inside, everything seemed normal except for 2 box fans that were set up in the living room, blowing on 2 different wet spots on the carpet. Family tried to repeatedly call their cell phones, but they never answered. Finally, after everybody had been searching for them all day, Josh pulled up to the house at around 5 p.m. and both boys were with him. He then went to the police station to check in and let them know that he was okay, but police started questioning his whereabouts. This is Josh's story. Around 5 p.m. on Sunday night, he took the boys sledding. They came back home and watched one of the Santa Claus movies. Around midnight, he decided to take the boys camping because they really wanted s'mores. First of all, it's late, but also I'd like to remind you that at the time, these boys were 2 and 4 years old. I honestly have a hard time believing that somebody as abusive and controlling as Josh would even have allowed his kids to stay up that late. But on top of that, wouldn't it just be easier to make s'mores in the damn microwave? And I would like to mention that it was blizzarding outside. Then he says Susan was asleep, so he packed up the boys in the middle of a snowstorm and went Simpson Spring Campground, which is somewhere out by Tooele and was like a 2-hour drive from their house. They left at midnight, wouldn't have even got there till 2 a.m. I really don't think these boys would be awake for those s'mores, but I digress. Police then asked him why he didn't call into work that day, and his answer was that he thought it was Sunday. He didn't think he had work. And to clarify, it was Monday. Should be easy to keep track of considering that your wife attends church every week, but maybe that's just me. Police obviously didn't buy this. They ended up secretly sending out some police to this campsite that he went to while they were interviewing him. They wanted to confirm his story because he was very specific about the s'mores. He gave them unnecessary details, saying that after they roasted the marshmallows, he realized that he forgot to get chocolate for the s'mores, so they just ate like marshmallow sandwiches, I guess. Part of my research for this case actually came from the Crime Junkie episode. I will link it down below. I love Ashley and Britt. They're very thorough with everything they cover, and it was a really good episode. But Ashley was majorly questioning this part of the case. She was asking if it's common for Utahns to go camping during a blizzard, and I'd like to say absolutely not. I've been camping plenty of times, and never have I or anyone I know chosen to go out in that kind of weather and go camping. Not to say it's never been done, but like, especially a last minute trip, like wouldn't you need to plan for something like that? It's really fucking cold out. The whole story is just not making any sense. Police got to the campsite and they looked for the fire that he would have supposedly built only 12 hours before, and they found nothing. They even said it didn't look like anyone had been there for a while. Back at the station, police let Josh know that Susan still hasn't been found. He tries to play it off and say that she's probably at work, which we already know isn't true, but he doesn't seem very concerned. He says that she probably just took the day off, knowing that she'd have a day to herself since he took the boys camping.
What are you concerned about?
You guys, you know, have implied some things, and so it concerns me.
We've implied what?
Well, you've implied that my hands have some kind of defensive wounds on them. Just
Okay.
because they're all cut up, and that's just, it's just the way they are.
Okay, so there shouldn't be anything you need to worry about then, right? I mean, if I have dry hands and my hands were nicked up like that because they're dry hands, I don't think I'd be worried about it.
Well, go and ask your
I
question.
mean, do we not have a job to do?
No, go ahead.
Luckily, police do consider Susan a missing person at this point, and they ask Josh to come back for a formal interview. The next day, before Josh went back in, he called his dad to let him know what was happening. During this interview, Josh kept his story and was just giving them the same information. Police were still not having it, and they ended up getting a search warrant for his house.
Have a seat. You might want to sit down, please.
Okay.
I just spoke with some of, sorry, this chair's screwed up. I just spoke with some of our other detectives. And you're gonna have to wait here with us. You're not gonna go anywhere. one of our detectives just interviewed your children. And your children are telling our detectives that Mom went with you guys last night. And that she didn't come back.
She did not go with us.
Okay, well, with that, just getting that information, you're not going to go anywhere. I'm not going to let you leave.
I'd like to note that at this point, everybody was in support of Josh. Nobody thought he had anything to do with it, and this included Susan's family. December 14th, Josh was supposed to go in for a third interview. He ended up getting a lawyer instead, didn't go to the interview, but he did agree to give police a DNA sample. Later that month, Josh was let go from his job due to everything going on in his life, and he ended up moving back in with his dad in Washington. He took the kids with him, and then a few weeks later, him and his brother drove back to Utah to pack up the rest of the house. Police are still suspicious, so they ended up getting a warrant for the van that he supposedly took the kids camping in. There were also searches conducted around the house that they lived in at the time, and they didn't have luck with any of it. We do later find out that Josh rented a car the night of December 8th, 2009. Investigators were never able to determine exactly where he went with the car, but he had it for 18 hours and clocked 807 miles in that time. On February 15th, 2 months after Susan went missing, her family calls a press conference where they paint Josh in the light that we see him in now. They talked about his abusive behaviors and how Susan was afraid of him, and she apparently said that she would leave him if things didn't improve before their next wedding anniversary on April 6th. In some of Susan's diary entries leading up to the disappearance, she wrote that she feared her husband and what he might do to her and her children. In an interview that Josh and his dad would go on to do together, they start making a news story. They said that Susan was in a long-time affair with a journalist that went missing around the same time that she did, and they say that they apparently ran off together. The only smart thing about this story is that they did base it off of an actual journalist who did go missing at that time. He was last seen on a security camera walking alone. But other than that, there was no connection. They didn't know each other. They were never able to prove that they were ever in contact with each other. I don't see how they would have even run into each other, considering Susan had no room to breathe. I don't know how she would have had a whole affair. Josh and his dad then create a Susan Powell website, as family does, to be helpful in finding their loved ones. Not them though. They essentially created a gossip blog and just trashed Susan, saying that she was a cheater and a horrible person and that she hated her kids. 6 months later, they decided that they were going to publish pieces of her teenage diaries to expose what a sexual deviant she was. And at this point, Steve started telling people that she did try to seduce him while she lived there.
Claiming Susan was a willing participant.
It was definitely a romantic obsession, yeah. I mean, Susan's a beautiful woman, and when a beautiful woman comes on to you like that, it's really hard to resist that kind of a thing. I mean, maybe it's just me. Probably inappropriate, but I admit those things were going on.
In 2011, both Utah and Washington got search warrants for Steve's house, where Josh and the boys were still living at that time. They found files and files and files of child pornography that belonged to Steve. They also found thousands of images of Susan, clearly taken without her knowledge or consent. Steve ends up getting arrested on 14 counts of voyeurism and child pornography. It was revealed that he had taken photos of the neighbor girls, who were 8 and 9 at the time. He took them from his bedroom window that looked directly into their bathroom. In 2012, a jury convicted him of 12 counts of voyeurism, but threw out the child pornography charges. Superior Court Judge Ronald Culpepper ruled the photos and videos of the girls' bathroom acts were not sexually explicit. I wanted to put that information in there because Steve was so clearly a pervert. There's absolutely no logical reason that you would have dismissed something like this considering all of the other stuff that they found. Luckily, the State Court of Appeals reversed this finding in 2014, and Stephen Powell was arrested again, and this time found guilty. He ended up serving another 2 to 5 years before being released. In 2012, the Pierce County Sheriff's Department released more than 2,330 pages from journals that they found in Steve's house. They found 17 notebooks that detailed his obsession with Susan. In one entry, he admitted that he would secretly record Susan and use those videos later when he masturbated.
Fantasize that she'll come down here and join me, but so far that's a daydream that hasn't come true.
This is where we found out that he used mirrors to look under the door because he wrote it down.
Steve's own journals reveal his infatuation became perversion and persisted through the years.
You know, she was very open in a sexual way.
And he was vocal about it after she disappeared.
There's an audio clip that he recorded where he actually confessed his love for Susan. I assume that he recorded it because he thought she was going to say it back. I'm going to play it for you in a minute, but just listen. You can hear how uncomfortable she is. And for reference, I think this was taken 8 years before her disappearance.
It'd be great to go to Colorado and see a different part of the U.S., you know?
Yeah. I'm probably wrong, but I've really fallen in love with you. Maybe I'm interpreting something that I shouldn't be interpreting. You know, it just, for example, when we were sitting on the couch, it just felt like you were very, you know, I mean, I was extremely aroused, and I think you were somewhat aroused, at least I thought.
I don't know where you're going with this.
Susan, I don't, yeah, well, I'll tell you where I'm
married to your son, and I should just be the daughter-in-law.
I know.
Which puts me a step beneath your own children.
Okay.
And that's where I'm comfortable. I was kind of meaning to talk to you about this. My own father doesn't kiss me, and you kiss me, and I didn't like that.
And you don't want me to hug you either. That's fine.
After this was recorded, Steve wrote in his journal that he was still convinced that she loved him and was sexually attracted to him.
Steve spent years convincing himself that Susan loved him back.
And I know she felt it. I mean, I know she couldn't have missed it. She's not naive either, I know, from what I've read in her journals.
Gary Sanders, a Pierce County detective who searched Steve's home, said that there were a lot of other items found as well. Quote, there were cotton balls where Susan had maybe taken fingernail polish off. They were dated and had her name on it. There were pairs of panties that were in Ziploc bags, feminine hygiene products that were in bags, toenail clippings, hair clippings, things that should not be kept. We were all in awe of basically the house of horrors that we were looking at. Ann Bremner, who was an attorney that were representing Susan's parents, actually said that the reason they initially moved to Utah was because of his obsession with her. After Susan's disappearance, Steve's journal took a turn. He wrote his first entry at 12:35 a.m. on December 8th, 2009, which was only 14 hours after Susan disappeared. It said, I am feeling sick. It's possible that Susan is dead. The story is so implausible and our conversation with Josh was so unconvincing that I feared the worst. He then spoke about some of his other children where he said, Michael and Alina are very supportive of Josh and advised him to tighten up his story as it sounds weak and unconvincing. Josh responded that the police may have already tapped his phone, which was the same as saying, be careful what you say. The journals made it sound like Stephen was convinced that Josh had already disposed of her body, and he started talking about some of the weird decisions that Josh had made leading up to the disappearance. He said, in the last 2 weeks, Josh bought an oxy welder and a rug doctor carpet cleaner. I had no clue why he might want a welder, but now I wonder if it was required for the process of mutilating or disintegrating her body. Josh's brother Michael, on the other hand, didn't think that this was premeditated. He thought it was a murder of passion. He told his father that the story was so poorly planned that he didn't think it was possible for him to have thought it through. There was one belief that Stephen seemed to keep writing down in various ways. He repeated again and again, "I doubt Susan is alive, and I doubt Josh's hands are clean." This is going to be the end of part 1, but I will upload part 2, and I will link that down below for you guys. So go ahead and click on that video.